Welcome to Hoodootube, your one-stop shop for reviews of fantasy, horror, and supernatural entertainment for the African diaspora. I'm currently watching the Marvel TV series Cloak and Dagger, and I'm surprised I haven't heard more about this series from comic book fans online. While I'm not sure if this series is considered sci-fi, fantasy, or a mixture of both, this series is captivating for its portrayal of young people overcoming adversity, but also learning to control their growing superpowers. Cloak and Dagger is an iconic superhero duo from Marvel comic books that debuted in Spider-Man comics in 1982, and have been one of the most visible interracial couples in comic book history. And considering that even during the 1980s, interracial couples were still very taboo, these characters were pretty progressive for their time. The dual storylines and original stories have varied over the years depending on the writer. For the most part, these heroes usually discover their mutant powers as teenagers and come together to survive their stressful family situations, like being ostracized from their families and living on the streets to survive. In this TV series, both Cloak and Dagger, or Tyrone and Tandy, have stressful family lives where they feel disconnected from their parents. Both Tandy and Tyrone, who live in New Orleans, Louisiana, survived traumatic events and the deaths of close family members when they were children, but neither of them realized till much later that they were both present during their respective accidents when they both received their mutant abilities. Tyrone is mourning the loss of his brother, who was wrongfully accused of theft and was murdered by the police. And Tandy was in a traumatic car accident with her father, who drowned to death, and Tandy barely survived. Both Tyrone and Tandy feel tremendous guilt for surviving their loved ones, but it also takes some time for them to both realize the strange occurrences in their lives are because they have accessed their latent superpowers. Tyrone lives in the suburbs with his parents, but ever since his brother passed away nearly 10 years ago, he feels his parents don't trust him to make responsible decisions. Tandy and her family were financially well off, but since her dad's death, she and her mother have been struggling to make ends meet. While the mother has lost herself trying to prove her husband's death was caused by his employer's corporation, the Roxxon Corporation. Tandy runs away from home, lives in an abandoned church, and has leaned into a life of crime in order to survive. But once Tyrone and Tandy's powers begin to manifest, their powers begin to grow, but also bring them together. In the third episode of the series, Tyrone is still trying to make sense of his new powers that allow him to disappear into shadows and teleport to other places. Tyrone thinks he's cursed, but when he prays to God, a friend of his named Vita overhears his prayers and decides to help. She invites him out on a trip to discover. She's a tour guide for historic voodoo sites in New Orleans, like the historic icon and voodoo priestess Marie Laveau's gravesite, where people come to pray and make wishes. Evita even introduces Tyrone to a priestess who prescribes Tyrone a spiritual bath to help him expand spiritually, and it works. Another scene I thought was incredibly impactful is when Tyrone's father takes him to meet his fraternity from his old neighborhood that's rooted in Black New Orleans culture. Tyrone's dad, Otis, passes the test to enter, and Otis teaches his son about the history of their fraternity and their ritual of creating costumes every year that personify their spiritual growth throughout the year. And this is when Tyrone begins to create his own costume, a cloak that honors the legacy of his older brother. Tandy decides that if she's going to rob people for their riches, she's going to rob rich people who earn their money dishonestly. Throughout this series, both Tyrone and Tandy's powers begin to expand in interesting ways. Tandy can create light projections that can blind people, but can also cut like glass. But she and Tyrone also gain psychic powers, where Tandy can see people's hopes and dreams, and Tyrone can psychically see others' doubts and darkest fears. By using their psychic powers and their newfound connection, both Cloak and Dagger begin to find out about the bad players who were behind their family members' deaths, and a massive conspiracy that covers up the corporation Roxxon's experimental and illegal projects. But what I also love about this series is their portrayal of New Orleans cultural history, especially Black history, and Voodoo spiritual practices that are shown through several characters throughout the series.